I'm Mr. Oliver, Fuller High School, European History. So, why are you here? Hopefully to talk about the LEQ and the DBQ, because the LEQ and the DBQ are muy importante. They are worth a lot of points on the AP test. Now, the AP test, as you might already be familiar, is kind of focused on half of it is the multiple choice. And if you're in my class, you'll take your first practice test this week. I think most AP teachers are probably going to give at least one of the 55 question practice exams. It's hard. There's no getting around it. You don't know what'll be on it. The DBQ is a little bit different. It's extremely difficult for a lot of kids, but at the same time, if you know the rubric, you can have a bit of control over it. So, without further ado, let's talk about that. With the LEQ, this year you got 3 options as far as questions go. So you got that going for you, which is nice. And then you can maybe find a topic you like. Of course, there are certain topics they like more than other topics. This year, they sent out an email and they said that, load. They said that everything is all cattywampus. Now, I had everything all set up, and then there was a fire alarm. In case you came in late, it was because there was a beekeeper on campus, and the beekeeper was attempting to attack bees with smoke. I guess that's how you do it. I guess they're vulnerable to that type of attack. So the multiple choice, as I said, 55 questions, you get 55 minutes. That's 40% of your exam. I said half. I was exaggerating. Then you've got your short answer. We'll talk about that on a different day. That's 20% of your exam score. What we're going to talk about today is all the rest, which is 40% also. So your document-based question, your DBQ, is 25% of your exam score. They used to only give you 55 minutes. This year, they've upped it to 60 minutes. Now, when that happens, the way it works is you walk in, you do all your pre-administration stuff is hopefully done, but then you're going to be all like, oh, hey, now it's time to sit down and do my thing. And you'll do the multiple choice first. They give you a short break, usually approximately 10 minutes or thereabouts. Then they let you, go outside. Perhaps you feast upon food that you have brought. You are only allowed to have it in the outside area. Then you put away your food in your tummy, and then you come back in, and you're all like, oh, what now? And they give you this packet, and it's got the long essay, the DBQ, and the short. I recommend you do the DBQ first, then your long, then your shorts. Because quite frankly, a lot of students don't have the energy for what is essentially, if you look at the document-based question is 60 minutes, the long essay, they give you 40 minutes, and the short, they give you 40. So 80 plus 60 is like 140. So it's a little over 2 hours. And a lot of students are tapping out by the end. Earlier, somebody said I was echoing. Am I still echoing? If anybody is there, I have 7 people watching. My God, these are Tom Ritchie numbers. And is anybody getting an echo? If so, let me know. Anyway, so you come back, you get this big old packet. Do the DBQ first because you got some control over it. The document-based question is going to be on something you know. Like, for example, it might be on the French Revolution or Louis XIV or whatever. And you can have a little bit of control over that because you have a rubric. And if you know basics about all the major topics, you should be able to theoretically be able to go, okay, I already have some outside information here. So we're going to talk about the DBQ first. I'll take questions. If you have any questions, feel free. Just hit me up. Send a question via the chat. It's over there on mine. I don't know where it is on yours. And then we'll talk. Because ultimately, I'm just sitting here in a room all by myself. And it's weird and awkward. And frankly, I would like it if somebody asked questions. So, with the DBQ, first thing you do is you're going to have to look at the documents. I would spend 5-10 minutes at least looking at the documents. Try to stay calm. You're annotating them. You can't actually start writing for a while once you get the document set. I might spend the time looking for, do I recognize any of these people? Do I think, oh, hey, oh, Erasmus. Oh, that's right. That's that Renaissance dude. Early Renaissance dude, but Renaissance dude. Or, did they drop somebody else in there that's even more recognizable? Did they give you something really sweet, like it's about the French Revolution and they gave you Robespierre? And make little notes, like, oh, a little star or something, saying like, oh, I know that guy. This is a person I recognize. I can access some outside information. Important later about that guy. Then BB says, how was your day? It's pretty good, thanks. Except the beekeeper thing. Then you're reading for content as far as how it relates to the question. So usually the questions that AP likes, they like to ask a question that you can respond with 2 or 3 groups. That actually used to be part of the rubric. They have changed this over the years, but a lot of readers, such as myself, are used to reading the old type, and we're used to seeing the groups. And essentially all that means is that you have a paragraph essay, 5-paragraph essay, where you have your introduction and thesis, then you have 1, 2, 3 body paragraphs, usually relating directly to the question. Like if, for example, they say, analyze the trends that happened in relation to the French Revolution's attitudes towards society. That was kind of clumsy, but something along those lines. Then you would go, oh, okay, trend number 1, trend number 2, trend number 3. And perhaps one would be like, oh, okay, the treatment of the rich or whatever. And the second one would be like, oh, okay, the treatment of religion. And 3, you could just talk about like, heck of guillotines or whatever. Let the documents kind of guide you on that. Like if you find a couple of documents on one topic and another one on another topic, let them guide you. They're giving you the answer. That's the beautiful thing about the DBQ, is even if you know nothing about it, you can still walk in, use the documents, and still get maybe a 3, perhaps a 4, just simply on the rubric. And that's pretty sweet. So you're going to need to first kind of analyze those documents. If you see commonalities, put them in little groups like that. That's real nice. Then it's time to start writing. Usually they say like, you may begin writing now or something. We're going to get there. We're going to get there, homie. So the first thing you got to do is look at context. For example, about my made up one about the French Revolution. My hair's sticking up. I've got a haircut. The French Revolution. What was going on that led up to that? So don't talk about anything. Don't be like, well, Napoleon happened. Okay, great, but nothing to do with what leads up to it. What does? Well, in that case, the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment does, because it affects thinking and whatnot. By and large, it should be around the same time leading up to your event. If you have something about the Industrial Revolution, cottage industry. If you have something about Louis the 14th, talk about Louis the 13th. Something that helps, thank you, baby. Something that leads directly up to what you're talking about. And that makes it nice. A lot of students have trouble with that because they either go wrong time period because they don't have good periodization. As you study and review for the AP test, I strongly recommend that you spend some time paying attention, not necessarily to dates, but to eras. Like, for example, you should be able to go, oh, all right, the French Revolution, boom, that's the late 18th century. It's better if you can go 1789, oh, the French Revolution, blah, blah, blah. But if you can go like, oh, okay, that's the late 18th century, you can go like, okay, well, then what came before that? Well, the Enlightenment is mid to late 18th century. there was that whole American Revolution thing. You can go a lot of different ways there and kind of help yourself with what is leading up to my event. Then the thesis. Oh, by the way, on that contextualization, I didn't actually call it that, but that's what it is. It's contextualization. On that, it is important that you spend a little bit of time on that, at least 2 sentences. You can't just casually go like, everyone knows the French Revolution happened after the Enlightenment. Moving on. No, you need to make a link. Understand this. The reader doesn't know you. The reader spends maybe 5 minutes with you. If they spend 5 minutes with your paper, you are getting a very slow reader, first of all, but you're getting somebody who's really just poring over your words. Odds are it's going to be someone spending more like 2 to 3 minutes tops. So you need to make an impression and let them know you know what you're talking about. Don't assume that they know that you know. Like, oh yeah, of course, I mentioned the Enlightenment, but I didn't talk about it much because I was running out of time. They know that. No, they don't. They don't care. I have been a reader. I've been a reader. Look at check it. Oh, wow. Look at all those are readers. I didn't get one last year because I did it from home. This year I'll be my 8th year as a reader. And what they like is they like to kind of they like to I'm very sorry about that to all my homies. They see this like that's in my eyes, and that's why I keep looking over to the screen. Trying to turn it off. Anyway, they have they're used to these essays. They're reading over and over and over again these essays. So they want to get to the point. They want you to answer the full question. Okay? So what's the ouch? Oh, the microphone. Oof. So you want to get to the point, contextualize about 2 sentences, perhaps 3. Don't spend so much time that you are, wandering off in a different direction and whatever. Just, establish and then make the connection. It's like a hamburger. You got your bun. Before you get to the hamburger, you got to get to the bun. That's where you establish. You can't have a hamburger without a bun. Don't try to give me any of this this stuff about like, oh, well, what about Atkins? I have lettuce. Then the lettuce becomes the bun. Okay? You still have something to frame everything else, and it needs to surround it. In a good essay, your bun or your lettuce wrap, if you're one of those people, is going to go throughout, and you're going to return to that, and you're going to show how that relates to your essay. Now, everything I just said applies to the LEQ, the long essay question, as well, because you need to pull something and go like, oh, that's what was happening around this time period. So you'll have that. Anyway, we'll go into that later. So then your thesis. Answer the full question, ATFQ, okay? If they say provide 2 reasons, provide 2 reasons. If they say give multiple, analyze the different trends, give them at least 2, preferably 3. Because again, a lot of us readers back in the day, we had a requirement for 3 groups. We're used to it. We've been brainwashed to think of it that way. So there's that. I haven't graded the test yet. You're a silly goose. Anyway, so you got that. All right, then your thesis is answering the question. Now, in response to my theoretical question, which was something like, analyze the different responses, the different cultural responses caused by the French Revolution. Then you're going to say, well, I'm going to kind of outline where I'm going, not spending a ton of time, but avoid being super vague. A lot of students do that, where they'll just be like, well, there were many responses. Nah, what were they? Cultural responses. Like what? Oh, well, my first paragraph is going to be about how they treated the rich. So how about they persecuted the rich, comma. What's your second paragraph going to be about? Maybe it's going to be about religion. Oh, okay. Persecuted the rich, comma, were all kinds of I got distracted by it that it's Peter. This is upsetting. All kinds of different ways that people dealt with religion. For the most part, they tried to erase it. So they tried to erase the Catholic religion or de-Christianize the country of France. Okay, comma. And they instituted a severe new form of punishment. Severe new form of punishment known as the guillotine. So, boom, boom, boom. I laid it out. That's all you need for a thesis. You just need to answer the question and provide a preview of where you're going. Let them know that you have an answer. Without doing that, you're saying, hey, I know it, but I don't plan on telling you until later. That's not what they want. They want your thesis in the first paragraph or the last paragraph. Okay, that's where they're told to look. Now, if you're one of these jabronis that doesn't make any sort of paragraph indentations, then I might say, well, you're doomed. Because if there's nothing but a first paragraph, they don't know where to look. They don't see any organization in your essay. You must leave a space or something, some sort of break where it's like, okay, I'm reading, now I'm done with the introduction, I'm going into the body. You must do that, okay? Then you've got your body paragraphs. In each of the body paragraphs, you're discussing one of the things that hopefully you outlined in your thesis. So, for example, in our theoretical one, our first body paragraph will be about, do you remember? All right. You got your, I already forgot it. What was it about the rich? You got the thing about the rich. So you're going to find your documents that relate to that. Thanks. Rich, religion, and the guillotine. And you're going to talk about those documents. Now, ideally, a paragraph is talking about more than one document. It's not required, but they like that. They don't like it when students will do what they call a laundry list, where they just go like, one paragraph is about document 1, blah, 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 blah. Paragraph 2 is about blah, blah, blah. Paragraph 3 is about blah, 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 where each document gets its own paragraph. They want to show that you understand this, and to use a fancy educational word, that you can synthesize the information. You're not just regurgitating it like a bird, like, here's the stuff I just read. They want to see that you can make these connections between things and go like, oh, these things belong together, which again is the grouping that we talked about a little bit. Then you want to, now you've established that, now you want to start using those documents. Now, there's 3 different ways you have to use. You have to explain them. They support, and this is what Jake was asking about, they support your argument, and you have to describe them. Describing is easy. In document 1, Cardinal Richelieu says blah, blah, blah. I don't know why Cardinal Richelieu is writing a document about the French Revolution. That doesn't make sense. I just made it up off the top of my head. But it's weird, but okay, you got that. Then, better, by the way, don't say in document 1. Say like, according to Cardinal Richelieu, the advisor to the French crown, which is almost always it's there. It's called an attribution line. That's a fancy word for it, where it says like, Cardinal Richelieu, comma, and then it's blah, blah, blah. A lot of students ignore that, but don't sleep on it. You actually got to pay attention to that because it really does help you. This is not like worth a point, but when a reader sees things like, well, in document 1, blah, 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 in document 2, blah, 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 it makes me think, this kid's not organized. This kid is not understanding or getting the documents. And there is 0 to none chance that if you do that, you're going to get the complex understanding point that you get at the end. So don't do that. That's sad. So all of that. Then you're looking, the describing is just simply saying what they said. Supporting your argument. Remember how I said get the hamburger bun? And that was the contextualization. The thesis is the mayo. It's the thing you need before you bite in. Like I'm the reader. I'm about to bite into your essay burger. What am I getting? I'm going to taste bun, toppings. That's your thesis. And your thesis is telling me like, oh, I'm going to expect these notes, these flavors, and then the actual meat, that is your evidence. More on that in a second. So your evidence, your documents, are supporting supporting the thesis. So what does that mean? Well, if you're supporting the thesis, you're relating back to it, and you're making connections. Better yet, remember that contextualization? Remember the bun? You can make connections back to that too. Like, for example, the French Revolution, the Enlightenment. All right, I'm writing my essay. I got my documents. I'm throwing them in. They're organized. And then I make a little allusion. I go like, oh, yes, John Locke, a philosopher, says in document 2, blah, blah, blah. As a student of the Enlightenment and a very influential figure, despite the fact he wrote in 1690, that is a little gravy, all right? It's apparently a gravy burger. And you're like saying like, oh, I'm showing off, okay? You can show off. Don't be modest. It's an essay, okay? You're a number. They're not going to be like, Brad's a little full of himself. They don't care about you, Brad. They just care about this essay. And if the essay is impressive, they'll be like, oh, nice. Now, a lot of people, let's be real, you might not have that stuff in your quiver, okay? So don't be trying to drop dates and whatnot if you have no idea. If you're like, oh, yes, as John Locke said back in 1943, blah, blah, blah. Then they'll be like, who is this? They don't know what they're talking about. And then you get back into where their brain is now saying like, cynicism. You're not going to get that complex thinker thing. So describing easy, supports, you just need to relate back to the thesis. Remember how we talked about how when you were writing that thesis, you listed off this, this, and this? Well, you go back to that. You say like, one of the reasons that this thesis, or one of the reasons the French Revolution persecuted the rich is because blah, blah, blah. Ooh, okay. You're making a little bit more information. And then you're saying, as we see in the document written by Cardinal Richelieu, blah, blah, blah. Oh, see what I mean? It's got a little bit of like layer to it now. It's not just a list of documents. That's like document 1 says this, document 2 says this, document 3 says this. Now you're giving us a little bit of like, oh, okay. I see as a reader, this kid gets it. This kid understands. I'm answering a question and I'm providing a little context at the beginning. I'm relating it back. I'm essentially writing a very miniature term paper where I have an argument and I'm backing it up with evidence. The hardest part is the explain. Jake, did that explain your question? Then you got explains, which I always call POV because that used to be what it was called. And POV is like, all right, I have like, all right, why did this person write what they wrote? This part is tricky because it requires a little bit of intuition on your part. And if you're not a confident author, you might not have said intuition. Like, for example, if Cardinal Richelieu, who is a supporter of an absolutist monarchy, says the French crown should be in charge for 1,000 years, blah, 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 everyone should be subordinate to it. Okay, great. Why would he say that? Why would he feel the need to put pen to paper and share those thoughts? Ask yourself, who's his intended audience? Think about, how did he write it? Was it a speech that was delivered that someone has transcribed later? Is it some sort of private letter? Is it a law? Okay, all of those could be used to kind of file it away in your head and go like, okay, these are helpful things. Then you would put it together, and that's how you get your POV. You say, all right, he would have written this speech because he wished to indicate to the people he was talking to. Okay, so now you got to know, who was he talking to? What if I don't know? Who would a cardinal who was advising the king give a speech to? For that, you got to kind of guess. I know That's no fun. You got to guess. But probably if he's talking about how important the king is and how everyone needs to be subordinate to him, then odds are he's talking to people who might be in opposition to that. Perhaps he's talking to other religious leaders. He's a cardinal. He's talking about how important the king is. Nothing should be above him. Go back, you reread the document. Seems like that's kind of right. Boom. He wrote this speech, or he delivered this speech, because, see, you got what it is, because he wanted, sorry, he wanted to convince other religious folk, religious leaders, other people in the church, that he was right and that they must not have any opposition to his policy, something like that. Now, in that, you had an audience, an intent, so what was he trying to do, and an audience, who was he gearing it after. Also, when you have a medium, that's something else to think about. Like, was it a speech? Was it a private letter? If he wrote that in a private letter, maybe he was working out some of his feelings. Maybe he was preparing a speech. If he was a private conversation with the king, maybe it was him saying, like, advising him, saying, King, we need to get new legislation. So that's why he said it. But something to the effect of, this person is saying this because. POV, point of view, is often used as shorthand for that, because it's like, what was this person thinking? What was their point of view? That was me taking their eyes and letting you see through them, their eyes. You need at least 3 points of view. I recommend you have 4 at least, because a lot of mistakes that people make involve doing a POV that really doesn't say why they wrote it. Just says, like, he wrote this to tell people that they should be subordinate to the king. Well, yeah, that's what he said. So you got the intent, but not really, because you didn't really say why he wrote it. He sounded like maybe somebody's writing an apology letter to Louis XVI, saying, like, hey, sorry we had to, throw you in prison. Maybe this person wrote this because, why? Why would you write an apology letter? They were afraid they offended him, but he's in jail. Maybe they feel guilty because he wants to blah, blah, blah. He feels guilty because he knows the king's going to die, but, he has a personal affection for the king, perhaps, like he likes it. Maybe he's torn, he's conflicted inside, and he wants to say, like, hey, king, I am, I'm upset, but what needs to be done needs to be done. I know you're a good man, you're a family man, but, the king's got to die so the revolution's going to live, in the words of Robespierre. So that's that. In general, if you're using, 7 documents or thereabouts, you go 2, 2, 3 usually. Each paragraph should have at least 2. Maybe you're feeling wild and you're just like, I'm going to have, all of the documents in one. Don't do that. Don't be wild. Be controlled and methodical. Your reader wants to understand that you've got it all laid out. Then you get into outside information. So we got 3 so far with the documents and the body. Then we had 2 in the good old-fashioned contextualization and thesis. Now we've got the kind of wild cards. One of them is outside information. Imagine you know nothing about the topic. You were not going to get this point. And with that, you probably won't get the complex analysis point. Well, then out of 7 points, you've still got a 5. 5 is really good. 5 is you did really, really good to the point where you are on a trajectory, my friends, to pass the AP test. Now, in real life, most students don't get 5s. Truth of the matter is, most of the DBQs I grade at the AP reading, they're like 2s or 3s, which is not good. That's not what we want, of course. They want people to do well. Like, a lot of people are like, the readers are so hard, blah, blah, blah. Dude, they want to give you points. That's a simple fact of the matter is they want to give you points. Students get 1s. Some students get 1s, but usually the students that get 1s aren't following the kind of format that I've been laying out, where they're explaining everything in detail and not assuming that people know what they're talking about. They're not making weird references like a 10th grade class that they assume the reader will understand. But in reality, the reader has no clue what they're talking about. I guess we'll have to write fast. I don't know what that means. I don't know why you're called BB in this one. There's a lot of questions. All right. Outside information is exactly that. It needs to be relevant. For the French Revolution, you got to look at all the documents. You got to go, okay, what is a thing I know about this topic that is not included? Mr. Oliver, there's a lot of things included. Yeah. But what specifically? Well, how about that the King of France attempted to flee to Austria because that's where his wife's family's from. Okay. Hey, you look at your documents, you double check, nothing about that was in there. Cool. Then you drop that info in there. Now, do you just randomly insert it like Cardinal Richelieu said this? Also, hey, the king's family was from Austria. First of all, it's not even right. The king's family is not from Austria, but you could go like, okay, well, the king's family was not from Austria. Oh, the wife's family was, but what's the relation to what I'm talking about? I'm not. Unless you have something where somebody is expressing reservations about the revolution or about the king being executed. Then you go, oh, perfect place to talk about why he was executed. Because he tried to run away and then he conspired against the revolution. That's a good time to drop some info, my dudes. So then you drop it in. It usually would be somewhere in your body paragraphs, although it's perfectly valid to throw it into your conclusion. I think it's more organic, it naturally flows, to throw it into your body paragraphs when you find something related. If you can't find anything related, like if you're just talking about your documents and it's like no, it doesn't relate to any of these things, it might be off topic. You feel like, well, I was going to talk about Napoleon. Is that really relevant? Because they're not going to be like, well, I had a kid, this is true. He wrote, Hitler's dog was named Blondie, and it was in a World War II essay. He's not wrong, but who cares in this context? Like, if the essay was about dogs belonging to Hitler, you are dead on, my dude. But if it's just like, oh, I don't really know, but I'm going to throw it in, not great. It should have something to do. The documents should make you it should be like a branch off of one of the documents. There was a document about so-and-so. Remember how I said when you're looking at the documents, do I know anything about any of these people? Well, maybe that's the time that you strike. There's a Manchester DBQ that I gave earlier this year. A lot of teachers give it out, where there's a thing by Edwin Chadwick, I believe. And he's like a reformer that wants to clean up the cities. Okay, outside information on that dude. He's a follower of Jeremy Bentham and a utilitarian. Now, if you just write that as you're talking about Chadwick, so in context, not good, not enough. If you explain what those things mean, sweet. Then we're talking about outside information. Again, 2-sentence minimum. If it's a reference within a different sentence and then you're moving on, not enough. You need to spend at least a couple of sentences there. I know time is an issue, but you simply must get it in. If you're going to sacrifice time, Don't do it here. The last point is complex understanding, and that's kind of a weasel point. There's a lot of different ways to get the point, but if you are presenting an entire burger that has intricacies, the outside information, oh, there's some lettuce, and then I've got like all these little POVs, these explaining things, oh, little tomatoes about, this is scrumptious, and as this kid is writing, they keep going back to that first paragraph. They're showing me how things changed from the contextualization where they were talking about, oh, the Enlightenment, and then they keep going back to the Enlightenment, and by the end, in the conclusion, they're saying, well, okay, hey, this guy, he was, they were all influenced by the Enlightenment, and despite the fact that some Enlightenment thinkers thought that the death penalty was terrible and should be gotten rid of, some of those same thinkers thought that it should be used to kill the king. There's your link to your third paragraph. Then my wife just texted me and asked me if I wanted to go to Boston Market. She sent a chicken emoji because she does not speak English. That's a nice little tie-up. Basically, the complex understanding I want to see as a reader, this kid knows what they're talking about and is well organized. Seriously, that's it. That's what I want to see. But 9.5 out of 10 times, the kid isn't. It's because you're panicked, you're flailing as you write this poor DBQ, and you mean well, but it's having trouble. Now let's pivot and talk about the LEQ. LEQ is similar in many, many ways. You're still trying to provide evidence that answers a question, of course, but you're attempting to bring in your own evidence. Now, in this way, it's harder than the DBQ. Because the DBQ, even if you don't know anything, you could conceivably still get a 5. And if you are bad at POVs, you could still get a 3 or 4. But you could get a 5. On LEQ, you ain't going to get a 5 if you don't know about that topic. The good news is they've changed it. And the new LEQ has 3 different choices. They give you 40 minutes. They used to only give you 35. Now it's 40. When I say they used to, I mean last year and the year before. And there'll be 3 different questions. The first one will be a question from period 1. Now, period 1 doesn't show up a lot in these essays, but that's basically your Renaissance all the way up to the era of religious warfare. So something there. Now, if I'm a gambling man, I think, well, what are the major topics for that time period? Wars of religion, Luther, maybe something about the Renaissance. And then I think, what do the AP people love? They love social history. So then I start playing the game and I go, okay, of those topics, which one can incorporate some, how did it affect the people? Or how did it affect groups that were marginalized, like women? They like to ask questions about ladies. So how did the Renaissance impact women? How did the Reformation impact women? Stuff like that might be kind of good ways to study a little bit. So you got that, which is nice. Now, second one is going to be periods 2 or 3. However, well, what are those? Period 2 is everything from the end of the 30 Years' War, 1648, all the way up to 1815. Okay, so that's going to be the French Revolution, absolutism, Enlightenment, all that good stuff. Period 3 is 1815. That's the defeat of Napoleon at Waterloo, all the way up to 1914. That's the beginning of World War I. And so it's going to be something during the 19th century. I spent a lot of time on the 19th century in my class. I bet a lot of professors, a lot of teachers did as well. So look back at your 19th century notes, your study guides and stuff like that. 19th century stuff is going to show up. There's no way around that bad boy. It's going to show up. So be ready for those topics. Last question, period 3 or 4. Miss Oliver, didn't you just say 3? You messed up. No, there's another chance for them to ask a 19th century question or a 20th century question. That means if you're smart money, you say, okay, I definitely need to know my 19th century stuff. Now, questions that could be from that time period. Again, just spitballing off the top of my head. But what would you say about the 19th century? Industrialization had already kind of started in the 18th century, but the effects of industrialization, desire for empire, lead up to the First World War as far as competitiveness between different. World War II is the 4th period, Peter. As far as interaction between the different countries, a period of relative peace, a period of liberalism, and people's right to vote getting expanded over time, beginning with the Congress of Vienna, which was 1815. And you go, oh, okay. Before someone tries to correct me, it started in 1814, and then they got a little interruption because of Napoleon coming back for 100 days, then they finished in 1850. I know, I'm just trying to simplify. So you get Congress of Vienna, that's super conservative. How do we go from that to the end of the 19th century where the vote in Britain has been expanded to most of the middle class? That's an interesting question. Things like that. So that's a good way to go, I think. Also, finally, the 4th period, World War I to present. They love to ask questions about the Cold War. And a lot of students have been flummoxed in recent years because some teachers don't get there. We do, in my class, presentations on it. So that is definitely a thing that they spend time on. But not everybody has time. So look at your book, make sure to review some Cold War stuff. Be able to be conversant in topics like, what were some major problems that Europe faced as a result of the Cold War? Like maybe something about how communism affected Eastern Europe versus Western Europe, something like that. And then if you can incorporate that with a more modern day kind of thing and go like, how did communism, how did the long-term effects of communism lead to a divide between the East and West? Ooh, that's an interesting one. So, hi, extra. You so extra. So you got that. Now that we got our breakdown here, I think I went over the whole thing. So just to say it again, you got 40 minutes. It's 15% of your exam score. You'll have 3 choices. You only have to write on one. Period 1 is question number 1. Period 2 and 3, one of those 2 is question number 2. And periods 3 or 4 is question number 3. You're going to pick one of those. So, sweet. You start answering. Pick the one where you feel like you can actually answer the question. Sometimes they'll throw you like a little curveball, and they'll say things like, well, discuss 3 blah, blah, blahs. Well, what if you only know 1? Not your question. Because when they grade it, they're going to be looking for all 3. So if there's anything that has a limiter on it, where it says, okay, you must discuss X number of things, and if you can't, stay away from that question. They're usually going to they like compare and contrast. They like discussing change over time. That's one of their big things. And they like social history. So, for example, how did the role of women change between World War I and the 1980s? Okay, that is a lot of information. Now with the DBQ, you can be like, you know what, I need something to help me. I'm going to look at these documents. Oh, they remind me of things. You don't have that on the LEQ, the long essay question. So you're going to have to really kind of pull out some arrows out of your quiver. Now, if you've got nothing, then that's a problem. With all 3 questions, if you're looking at it, you got nothing, then you're just grade grubbing at that point, and you're just going for as many points as you can. So you start off with contextualization. Can you talk about something from that time period? Surely you can. Surely you have all these choices. Surely you can pick something that relates to one of those choices, that leads into one of those choices. All right, sweet. Then your thesis. Hopefully you can answer the question. Maybe not a great answer, but some kind of answer. Like, they were, and you create your own structure and do it the same way, where you have a 5-paragraph essay. So maybe like, maybe there's a question about women and how they changed between World War I and the modern era, the 80s, 90s, aughts. You could say like, well, they changed as far as in the economy, women began to blah blah blah. Maybe they began to get more involved in the workforce and take over jobs that were traditionally men's jobs. Boom, that's right there in the thesis. Mr. Oliver, I thought I should save that. No, remember, you got to preview. Let them know you know what you're talking about. Then you got what's another thing? Oh, maybe I'm going to say a bad word. I apologize for that. Maybe as far as sexually, women changed, as far as their access to birth control and what was expected of them in marriage. I apologize for the bad language. I know this is a G-rated stream, but it's a hard G, so sorry. And then maybe as far as child rearing, that men were expected to do more of the stuff around the house, or that daycare became more available, or whatever. And then in your support paragraphs, you explain, explain, explain. I'm sorry, extra, that was not bad. But sometimes the AP Euro test asks you to go to places you don't want to go. Like, for example, one year there was a multiple choice question about French prostitution. I was aghast. I clutched my pearls. I was like, oh my goodness. But they still had to answer it. Kids. Sad. So anyway, in your evidence paragraphs, the thing I notice a lot of students doing, and this could be by design because they straight up don't know, is they're vague. Let people know. Pretend in your brain that you got these documents in your head and you're giving information. You've picked one of your best topics, right? You have 3 different choices. You picked your best choices. Have at least one paragraph where you can drop some info. If you can show change over time, because a lot of their questions are very geared towards that, or a complex understanding, you're going to be good. Because I'll be real, I've read a lot of bad essays. Students are vague and wrong. That's why they lose points. If you know what you're talking about and provide evidence, you should be good. Seriously. So there's that. That's really all I got to say about LEQs and DBQs. I'm going to have another one of these reviews coming up later this week. Let me look at my phone. But does anybody have any questions about them while I'm still here? Is the question, are the bees okay? The bees are probably not okay. The bees probably suffered as a result of being smoked out, but were not killed. They were probably uncomfortable. That's why we had a fire drill at my school today. My next review is going to be 5:30 to 7 on Wednesday, April 25th. Hopefully this will not be interrupted by bees, because I will be doing that one from home. I'll have my dog present. So that's a thing that'll happen. My family as well. So they will not be present for all of it. But if my kids are bored, they'll probably say hi. All 11 people now are very educated. Yes, thank you, Gavin. Yes. Can we just pretend like it's more like when you tell people, like if Tom Ritchie asks, say like, oh, it was like 111. Just add like 100. Okay, cool. Facts. I can't fax anything to you. I don't have a fax machine anymore. All right. Any further questions about anything? All right. Bye-bye.